order. Mr. McIver.
Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First off, we will approve minutes from prior meetings, the first of which is the non-public work session of July 13th. We have a motion on that
I'll move that we approve those minutes.
by Armand with a second by
Second.
John. Any discussion? If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I abstain.
Because
Not present.
you were not here, okay. And then on the regular board meeting minutes, also of July 13th.
So moved.
Motion by John,
And seconded.
second by Armand. All those in favor?
Aye.
I abstain.
Mr. Bolton abstaining. Those minutes are approved. We have our regular announcements, which is that our regular meetings are at 6 o'clock. We're actually going to have a meeting next Monday, August 3rd. And then our next one will be August 10th. That would be the regularly scheduled one, and on August 24th. So August 3rd, 10th, and 24th, with work review sessions prior at 5. There's also tentatively a work session scheduled for August 31st if necessary. All of these meetings will be held here unless otherwise posted. Weather observations for the month of June are available in the town hall. Citizens wishing to be listed on the board's agenda should notify the town hall before noon, the Friday before the meeting. I have no comments, have no plaques, and so our first real item is to consider the appointments of Aaron Como and Thomas Dawson, who I think are here tonight with...
They are. May I
Yes.
approach? Thank you. I know that protocol usually takes that I would brief Chief Lefebvre on this. Chief Lefebvre is not available. We did speak on this matter. He did approve both of these appointments. I did speak with Paul this afternoon.
who filled us in on your conversation, so we're all on the same page there, I think.
So I have two employees that I'd like to bring forward to you. One of them, I think some of you may know, is Aaron Como. Aaron Como is a local person, graduated from Plymouth Regional High School, began his full-time policing career with the Plymouth Police Department. From there, went and took a supervisor's position at the University Police, and then from there went off to the State Police, and he's now ending a 20-plus year career there as a trooper. The other applicant is Tom Dawson. Tom Dawson has had experiences in Meredith and Moultonborough, and is now as a sergeant with the City of Franklin PD, and has had they've both had extensive amount of time or experience supervising police officers, and their resumes of skills is quite elaborate. I'd like to request that they both be appointed as police officers to be working at Plymouth State University.
All right. Any questions for the deputy chief? Any other discussion about these two? Do I have a motion?
So moved.
You're going to move to appoint both of these gentlemen, Mr. Dawson and Mr. Como?
Yes.
Yes. Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second that motion.
You guys are doing the moving and the seconding tonight, I see. All right, if there's no further discussion, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. That should take care of that, so we'll just sign this thing, these things. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
Would you like to meet us too?
Yeah, did we bring friends and family?
We did.
You okay?
I'm sure most of you know Aaron
Yes.
Como. As I said, Aaron is actually from the area. He's a
Yeah.
graduate of Plymouth High School. Aaron, you must know most, if not some of these people that are right here.
Some familiar faces for sure. It's been a while since I've been in town, but.
This is
Neil McIver.
right.
It's been a while. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you
Mike
as well.
Conklin, I don't think you do know me, but.
Armin Gerard.
Armin, nice to meet you.
Welcome.
John
John,
Rudliff.
nice to meet you.
This is
I'm going to see traffic stops.
Thomas Dawson. And Thomas Dawson immediately rose to the top of the list just because of his haircut.
How you doing? John Rudliff.
Yeah.
Guess we just don't.
So who did you guys bring with you tonight?
Tom brought his family.
And my daughter Zoe and my son James.
Nice to meet you guys. Yep.
I'm by myself.
You're by yourself, okay.
My family grows older, they always have other things to do.
Yeah, okay.
We're running
I know
into
the feeling, yep, absolutely. All right, well, I think you guys are all set. Well, I think you have to take the oath before the
Yeah,
town
we'll just take an
clerk.
oath with Karen at their convenience.
Yeah, we'll have him back in. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, nice
Thank
to
you.
meet you guys.
Thank you.
Oh, and then we have correspondence. We have a letter from John Keller. This is a letter from John Keller, who's been with our fire department for a long time, to Chief Clogston. And he says, "Please accept this letter as my resignation from the position of captain with Plymouth Fire Rescue. My resignation will be effective August 1, 2015. I would like to thank you for the opportunity to serve the community in the capacity of a permanent member for the past 14 years. I would like to continue my service to the town by rejoining the ranks of the call company where I started my career almost 20 years ago. During my remaining time, I will make every effort to wrap up my current projects and pass on any pertinent information. Please let me know if there's anything else I can do to make the transition easier on the department." And then Chief Clogston wrote us a note, just essentially enclosing that letter, but telling us that John has accepted a job with the New Hampshire Fire Academy, where he will be the captain in charge of the drill yard. So, I'm not sure, do we accept his resignation?
Yeah.
Yes. Do we have a motion on that?
I move that we accept his resignation
But with
with
regret.
regret.
I'll second that motion.
All right. Any discussion, any salient comments anybody wants to make? If not, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. And then we have visitors. Uh-oh. The Villa Magna, Amy Villa Magna? Was that even close?
That is.
It's wonderful.
Should I come up there or?
Yes, well, wherever you feel comfortable. Yeah, you'll need to be closer so we can hear you.
I don't know, I guess I'll pretty loud.
Or
Sure,
you can sit, yeah.
that's even better. Great, thanks. So I brought with me my graduate assistant, Lisa Scott, who is second year master's student in environmental science and policy. And so she's been working on the summer project
I'm
in
sorry.
Meredith.
I just missed your name.
Lisa?
Lisa, okay, so Amy, yep, got it.
And so I believe I'm here because Neil had contacted June Hammond Rowan at Plymouth State, but Neil and I were also in contact this past fall. I am a still relatively new professor at Plymouth State University. I started last August. I'm in the graduate program of environmental science and policy as well as the undergraduate program. And so last fall I was just getting my feet under me, and I can't even remember how you and I came into contact, but I don't know if it was through June initially. It was Lisa Donor.
Lisa,
Donor
yeah.
had mentioned to me invasive
Conservation.
species, yes, from the Conservation Commission. And my history, my research background was on invasive species, aquatic plants, and so she said, oh, Plymouth is having an issue with knotweed and some other plants. Maybe you could talk to Neil McIver about this. I said, sure. So then we talked, and right about the same time I had found out that Plymouth had work study funding that I could use to have students. So we started to get a project off the ground, and then the season shifted, and we didn't really have an opportunity to do a lot of mapping. Come March, I think it was, someone that June Hammond Rowan, who's also at Plymouth State, had contacted her about potentially mapping in town, in Meredith. And so it's working with Mark Billings and Jim Greger and John Egger. I don't know if you're familiar with them. So I think news of that probably got back to Neil. And then I was emailed to try to set up a time to come meet with you and see if maybe Plymouth was interested in formalizing the relationship that we had tried to start last year, whether that's with support or getting a feel for what the priorities are for mapping Japanese knotweed in particular, but then also other species. So I didn't know how much to share with you, but I did want to give you just a background on what we have been doing in Meredith. So I only made 2 of these so you guys can share, but there's several maps in there. The first 2 are focusing on Plymouth, and so they're more a proposal of what could be done here and just some ideas that I had for that. The next 2 pages show 4 different maps, a series of maps that represent sort of our progress as of last week, I think, in Meredith, basically showing what's going on. Most of those surveys in the town of Meredith, they have about 90 miles of roads that are not state maintained. Those are town maintained roads. And so the goal of the project there is pretty much phase 1. It's to get a feel for how dense and how populated knotweed is throughout their town, on their town roads, where they could potentially be managing it. We went into the project with the expectation of trying to delineate the size of individual patches, how dense they were, how contiguous they were along the roadsides to help sort of inform any management practices. A couple of additional analyses that will come from this will be how close are individual plant patches from waterways, because that largely dictates how the plant can be controlled, whether it be herbicides, so chemical herbicides, they can't be used within a certain proximity of water. So what we're working on for Meredith this summer is really a prioritization plan, a way of assessing what's currently there, how severe it is in certain areas, getting a feel for high value landscapes in that area, and then trying to prioritize what makes sense for them. I believe they've initiated a 5-year management program for invasive species that includes engaging the public as well. So a lot of our information right now is helping them inform a process where they have door hangers that they're putting on residential homes that say, have you seen this weed? If so, please contact the Conservation Commission so that they can arrange a time to try to manage it. That data is also going to be incorporated into this spatial database to try to help prioritize and keep the town on top of everything. So they've been focusing on roadways, doing roadside surveys. They had to walk the internal parts of town. And then recently they've been surveying the property that's owned by the town as well to use that as a demonstration site so that they're role models for stewardship of this invasive plant. So that's been going on in Meredith. And I guess what I came to talk to you about was whether Plymouth was interested and able to do something similar here, to what level, and how we can take another step. We still have all of August, all of September, and early October easily a viable time to get out into the field. And since so much of the initiation that goes into creating a database template for collecting the data, which I'd be happy to share with you guys, since so much of that is already done, it's a lot easier to hit the road running right now. In addition to Lisa, I also work with an undergraduate student who's going to be she's a rising junior or senior, I can't remember, in Plymouth. She's super familiar with knotweed. It drives her absolutely crazy in Plymouth. And so when she heard I was coming here today, she was all extremely fired up and said, yes, get them to do something about it. And they're both willing and able to continue working if that's possible. So we can think a little bit more about what that means, or if the town does have funding to run them. It's pretty low budget given the fact that PSU is supplying the GPS units, which are Trimble units. They're high accuracy Trimble units. We have our mapping license for ArcGIS, which is the software we're using. Much of my time is donated to it, so it's really just a matter of running their field time and their data analysis time. That's what we're working with. And in Meredith, they're also reimbursing for mileage, which is slightly more because they have to travel to Meredith and then travel back, whereas here it's a total of, I believe if you look on that front map, the amount of, somebody correct me if I'm wrong here, but I believe local road length in Plymouth is only 40 miles. So if you consider on certain areas you might have to do a first pass, on driving one direction and then a pass coming the other. That's, roughly 80 miles of travel, unless you're on a low-density road where you're able to pull over and really map things out by walking. And then I think I also put in there a road map, and then as well as a walking map, as a way of saying downtown Plymouth is pretty high density with roads, and it would be challenging to do a roadside survey where you're driving. So I was proposing those as being walking surveys, which is good in the sense because when you're driving, you need to have two people in the car, one driving, one logging. If you're walking, then you individually split up and you let the equipment do it. So we use 2 GPS units with 2 people, and they get to go in different directions, right? So a little bit more efficient.
Huh. So you don't happen to have a picture of knotweed, do you?
Not on on your phone.
Oh, that's okay.
I could draw it.
I don't know what it looks. Does everybody else know what it looks like?
Yeah, it's got canes, it's got broadleaf.
Heart-shaped leaves.
Yeah.
And it's
If you
hard to
drive
kill.
on Route 3 South out of Plymouth, and you
Yeah.
look down the left-hand side, the riverside, that's all knotweed. That
Really?
everything that's coming into the road is knotweed. It's a wall on that state road. It's
And
massive.
what is it? What's the problem with it aside from the fact that it's not supposed to be there? What does it
Well,
do?
it will completely over-establish other native vegetation.
Mm-hmm.
From a safety perspective, I'm a road cyclist. It comes into the road, it blocks visibility in terms of turning in intersections. It's really challenging.
Is it high? You mean
It
blocks
becomes
view?
extremely high, and it cuts over any type of railway that you have.
Has to go through foundations too. It's a very deep root system and very hard to.
Does it go through foundations? I don't.
thought. Well, let's tell that story anyway.
Yeah, I mean, in most,
Makes it
I
sound
guess
really
most of the
scary.
places I've seen it, it's also really not tucked in close to buildings. It's more on roadsides. It's
Yeah.
in highly disturbed areas. We had some discussion in the fall about it potentially coming from some of the fill dirt or any type of damaged areas. So if you're putting up a new telephone pole or something and you have fill dirt going in, Meredith is actually looking right now at the potential that the fill dirt might be a source of the reseeding in some areas. So you can look at the history of disturbance along roadsides. If they've done any construction where they required fill coming in, some of their town properties are demolished by it right now.
Does it offer any nutritive value to wildlife?
Not that I know of.
Okay, that's a good enough reason right there.
No. Not that I'm familiar.
So for the fall period, this would be, you found a picture?
Yeah, good job.
This would be a sort of a study for the fall. Is that accurate mapping or a study?
An assessment?
Sure.
I guess a lot of it is a question of whether you have management intentions and how this, a lot of what I'm doing, at least for Meredith and what I had envisioned for Plymouth, was providing decision support, management support, so that when the decision comes, how, we absolutely need to manage this, what's the best option, that you have a full sort of spatial assessment of where is it dense, where are the priorities, where is it close to, what.
Do you know if there's been any studies elsewhere? I'm sure there have been. If left unchecked, what the ramifications would be in like a 5-year or 10-year period?
They have some spreading rates that'll, it's an extremely aggressive noxious weed in the sense that it can reproduce, I believe, in 3 or 4 different ways, so it can just continue to clone. So it's the root density that just keeps spreading out. So if you cut it, you're really just propagating more along its roots. So one of the strategies is nip it in the bud before it becomes completely dense, because it's sort of exponential at that sense. The growing mass becomes greater.
What do you
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. Well, what do you think would be a solution to this if it's found to be this huge invasive species, and it's already existing and it's already established? What sort of vehicles are out there to alleviate it, I guess?
Right, so you can manually remove it, dredge it up. You can chemically treat it, and that will definitely kick it back for a couple of years. And in terms of the treatment and management side of things, I am not as familiar with the success rates, although that is part of what we're doing for Meredith. Is once we have the prioritization done, we're making management recommendations based on different treatments. And what they're doing is they have a couple of demonstration projects where they're physically doing, I think, 3 different manual removal for low density, smaller patches. They're doing some herbicide trials in there. But I think that research comes along with the process. And so I guess what I'm proposing is that I'm I'm proposing a service that could potentially help you if you wanted to manage it. And I've heard from several people in Plymouth that that is something that they want to see happen, because it does have the potential to just completely wipe out native vegetation along the roadways. So any fern species that we have, views of the river are getting completely destroyed because it's so dense and it becomes just this wall. It makes a great property boundary if you want it on your property, so you can't see your neighbors. But
So is the intent, well, I was just thinking, like, it used to be in Concord, and they used to propagate it down there as like a, a beautiful plant.
Yeah.
But is there an intent to, like, branch out after this is assessed, and then, with a treatment program, and then look at other invasives, or?
that's that's really the town's call. I'm here as support, science support, mapping support, that aspect of things. I'm really interested in, I have some personal research questions and hypotheses about the limitations of where it grows and, the soil acidity, looking at what other vegetation is in the area, whether they're competing, what the right threshold is for outcompeting. If you can step in and treat before it becomes a certain size, is your success rate higher? Those are things that I'm personally interested in as a scientist. But in terms of what you would look for and how far along you guys are in thinking about potentially managing it, which sounds like you haven't necessarily thought about managing it yet. I guess understanding how bad of a problem it is and what the damages could be is an important first step. Recognize one of the things that I hope to do in Meredith, and if we were doing it in Plymouth, is have students start to assess what neighboring vegetation or adjacent vegetation is, because really that gives you an idea what will be lost over the next few years.
So what would it cost us to have you do this initial mapping thing?
So that kind of depends. I can tell you based on what we're running with right now, how it works out. So right now we have a rate of field mapping is probably about $11 to $12 an hour, depending on, I think actually graduate student $13 an hour. Lisa serves as supervisor. Undergraduate is running at $11 an hour. GIS analysis and mapping, so anything where we take the data back in and we're doing analysis afterwards to give you summary, is about $16 an hour. Mileage reimbursement, according to the university, is about 41 cents per mile if they're driving, so that's really not a huge cost. I think at most it would end up being like $30 or $40 in fuel reimbursement. In terms of the hours that would be needed, I was really toying with this and trying to get a feel for, well, if we walked it, how many road miles can we cover in an hour, in 2 hours? And so much of it really depends on the density that's there. How long do you think each point, like when you show up at a spot in Meredith, how long it takes you to log all the data?
Probably 30 seconds or
yeah,
so.
once you're there. Yeah. So these two are trained now to where they have, what we've developed is a template that allows drop-down options for the extent, so how large the patches, how dense, and since they've been looking at it all summer, they're pretty quick on it. So it's been going really quick in Meredith, which is fantastic. So I think what I was estimating, I would share this with you, but then I only have one. I try to do a low end and a high end option, but in terms of hours, I was thinking the walking would probably, since there's 14 miles that I highlighted in the walking survey, that I think would be reasonable for people to walk instead of driving. If you think about that, maybe assessing 3 miles in 6 hours, that gives you more than enough time, would be about 28 man hours. I don't know, I'm looking at between 1,700, and that includes my supervising time, all the way up to 2,500, depending on how much extra time.
That's a decent range.
Yeah, it is a decent range. But so much of it is a matter of really not knowing how long it's going to, and also, and also what you would want to know. So in Plymouth, we're going through with just a point method, where every time we see a plant, we're mapping it. If it's a defined cluster, we're mapping it. In the fall, what we had discussed was even potentially trying to map the full size of a patch, which in some areas you can access fairly easily, but that adds a lot on. If you're doing any type of soil measurement or nearby vegetation, sure, that's going to take a while. That's like half an hour per site. So, yeah, I think the range there is pretty substantial. I can tell you that what it's costing Meredith is a lot more because they have more roads and they initiated the development. So you would actually be, don't tell them I said this, you'd be benefiting from the R&D that already went into bringing us up to this point. So,
All right. Well, I don't think we're in a position to, decide, but it's
Oh, yeah.
nice information to have, and we'll talk about it.
sure. Sure, and if, I would just say, as we progress, if there's even an option where if you looked at the map and you said, okay, we're really more concerned about this one area, we can focus on that one area this summer and get a feel for what that is. Or if it's just the road surveys, do that. And there's options in terms of just trying to not allowing another growing season to pass without getting it done. I think getting some phase done now and then also come spring, because it really starts to become obvious first week in June is what we noticed. It was a really, probably late May, early June's a good time to get out, and it just continues to grow, and then it'll start to flower, so it becomes even more obvious. But working with it part-time and having a heads up for how to integrate students would be good.
Is this stuff all over the state?
It is. Well, I mean, I'm guessing that. Yeah, and I'm assuming it's probably not so much up north. It's going to be in more disturbed areas. So, and I don't know how far it is up north. There haven't been mapping efforts. So, to the best of my knowledge, Meredith is one of the first that's really mapping. Maybe in southern New Hampshire, but I haven't come across any other programs that are doing it. But I do know that Plymouth has a suite of invasives. I know Neil could rattle off all of them for you very quickly. So even starting to think long term about integrating Plymouth students in. So even if this is just a jump start, and finding a way to develop it into a research program would then provide the foundation to integrate students in, whether that's through an independent study or if there is work study money that comes through the university, which is basically granted to them, and then they allow faculty to apply for it, which is what I had last year. So I could apply to have 3 work study students and then recruited them based on their interest and their ability to map in GIS and to get out in the field. So if that comes through, this budget could reduce pretty drastically. But I would say to take advantage of even a few months in August, if you're interested in that, then we can, work the numbers per se to figure out what that is. And even I can give this to you, which includes what I just told you because I have the digital copy, but even on the low end with my summertime, if we were able to initiate something this summer, so much of it is already with the 2 students, so their training's not needed. So my time is reduced onto going over what products should occur and whether it's suitable and being more of a liaison, stuff like that. So I'll give you that.
Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Appreciate it. It's interesting, and now I know where to look for knotweed, which is something I didn't know before.
Just wondering, so if you're out doing an inventory, if you see a purple loosestrife, you just happen to pull it up and throw it by the side of the road, or two for the price
Yeah.
of one, or
We could, but then we would have to track management, so we'd have to add a column to our thing and say, okay, it was managed on this day. But yeah.
next time.
Okay, great.
Well, thank you so
Yeah,
much.
thanks for your
Nice to
time.
meet you. Thanks for
I put my business card on there so you guys can email
Yeah,
me if you
saw
have any
that.
questions or anything.
Thank you very much for coming.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for looking at our pretty maps.
Thank
hot
you
off
for
the
bringing
press.
them, they're great.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. Great. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
I think there's gonna be new purchase order, Chief Clogston. Good evening. So I see $5,870 for Verathon Medical Glide Scope Ranger Pediatric 1-2 baton. That sounds pretty fancy, doesn't it?
What that is that goes along with the glide scope that we bought a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
What that does is it assists with breathing tubes when the paramedics are going to insert it directly into the airway. We can't use that device with a pediatric patient. So my captain of EMS, there's been a few times where that device could have came in handy. So he asked that we put it in the budget. We did. It was accepted. And I think giving those guys everything out there they can potentially save a life is well worth it. These are reusable blades. It's not a one-time use. So.
Okay. And this was part of the budget?
Yep.
Already?
Yep.
And, should we go through all three of them and take a vote?
I think
Is that
that's a
all
good
right?
idea.
So, okay, so the next thing here is, our pro rata share of the Lakes Region Dispatch Services, $47,983.02. We do that every year, right?
Mhm.
It's about the same.
Yep.
Any questions about that?
No.
And then, Lakes Region Fire Apparatus Engine 4 Repair and Paint, $13,225. Is that something that was in the budget or not?
That's in the budget. What that was is, as we look at the trucks, we see areas where it's, rust is starting to
Yeah.
form and whatnot, so this was,
Is that the Mac?
no, this is the Freightliner. So we put it off last year, and they said, yeah, it wasn't gonna get much worse, and they held with the price that they gave us last time, so, but it is time to do it before it gets out of control.
Okay.
Where does it go?
Allocated amount.
I'm sorry,
Where does it go?
where does what go?
The truck?
That goes to Lake Street and Fire Apparatus. They're down
Laconia?
they're down in Tamworth, just outside of Ospey. They used to be located in Moultonborough, then he bought land and put in a bigger shop. He's got a nice big paint booth, and as far as I know, he's the only one in the area that can handle a truck of this size. So, and he works on primarily fire apparatus.
So we have a motion for the chief
So moved.
for all three.
All three.
purchase
Purchase
orders.
Second.
So we have a motion by Bill, second by Neil, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And this Wednesday, the shift is throwing John a little bit of a lunch celebration down the road. We're going to have a weekend celebration, which might be more festive. But anybody here that wants to come up to the firehouse
On Wednesday.
this Wednesday at noon, have a burger, and,
Thank you.
Oh, all right.
okay?
Thank you for that.
All right.
Great, thanks.
Have a good night.
A free lunch.
Yes, there you go.
You'll see Neil.
No such thing, you know better.
No such thing as a free lunch, right?
All right, and then
Can I
last
talk?
item on our
I
agenda.
left my pen in the car.
Well, I guess we'll get these things signed first. Oh, I kind of skipped that. I didn't skip that. I was about to. Do we have any committee reports to, anybody have any?
Sure.
Opinions?
I have one.
All right, yeah.
In a minute.
One thing at a time, right?
Start writing my name backwards. On July 21st, I attended the Plymouth Village Water and Sewer District meeting. They attended to their regular business, and in addition, they approved the mainline extension agreements for the new Fairfield Inn. It's called Great North Hospitality on paper, and it's located behind the McDonald's out on Tenny Mountain Highway. And also, they've started construction on Fairground Road and on the water and sewer line down behind Hatch Plaza along the river. Those are major repair jobs. They're reconstructing those lines. And right now, Fairgrounds Road is closed off in the vicinity of the hollow by the old fairgrounds. So I guess you're not going to be able to drive through there for a few days anyway. They also approved contracts for paving and environmental legal work and design work by the Wright Pierce engineers. Also, there's a project going on adjacent to Interstate 93 just before you get to exit 26 when you're heading north. on both sides of the road there. The state is actually doing the project. It's to divert salt away from the area of the town wells. And also they had to do a pump station repair out by Burger King recently.
Okay.
That's
Thank
it.
you. Thanks. Anybody else? All right, so we're going to bring up the alternative treatment center, and I have something over here. Maybe most of you know or have heard that the state legislature passed a law a couple of years ago permitting a mechanism for the dispensation of medical marijuana. And I wrote this little announcement, then we're going to talk about it. So this law will allow 4 of these so-called stores or dispensaries to sell marijuana to chronically, terminally, and seriously ill people for therapeutic purposes. The 4 stores are to be located, one each, in 4 geographic districts of the state. One of these districts includes all of Coos, Carroll, and Grafton counties, excluding Hanover and Lebanon. Following an application process presided over by Health and Human Services, 3 entities were chosen to provide the 4 stores and 4 marijuana cultivation sites. One of the successful applicants will have 2 of each of these. The entity chosen by Health and Human Services for the Northern District is an outfit called Sanctuary ATC, a non-profit corporation which was created presumably for the purpose of operating one of these stores and cultivation sites. The decision about who was going to do these stores and cultivation sites was made about a month ago. Last week, a representative of Sanctuary made an appointment to speak with our town administrator, Paul Freitas, and he came with several associates to describe the venture and announced that they were looking at Plymouth for their site to sell the marijuana. The following day, they filed an application for site plan review with the town, which identifies the abode property on Tenny Mountain Highway as the site for the store. Health and Human Services has written that these facilities will only go in towns that favor them and has indicated an intention to seek local input before approving any facility. Under these circumstances, and having discussed it at our work session earlier this evening, the Select Board decided it was an important enough matter to make an announcement so that folks are aware. The site plan review hearing is scheduled for August 20th at 8:30. I'm sorry, let's make that 6:30. Don't come at 8:30. It'll probably be over or in process. So it's 6:30 on August 20th. As always, all are invited to attend. Because we think this is a fairly important matter, we've also decided to schedule a public hearing to be run by the Select Board on August 17th at 6:00 p.m. And then we're also going to discuss it or have it available for discussion on our agenda for our next meeting, which is going to be at 6:00 next week, preceded by a work session as usual at 5. And so we just wanted people to be aware of that. And I think, Paul, you had a couple things you wanted to say about it.
Yes, I'd like to bring the staff from the town hall up to the table and just give some background on how we got to today.
All right. Brian?
And a little bit more of an understanding, Kathy.
And Kathy, I'm sorry, I thought Kathy was kind of already here. Not quite.
On how they reached out to us and how we haven't been reached out to.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen.
So before that meeting came into play,
Now, that meeting is the one with the representatives
with a
of their
rep from the
office.
Sanctuary
Yep.
ATC, Jason, he had actually reached out to the code enforcer, Brian Murphy, first. and then reached out to the planner, Sharon Penny, second, to which then I asked that Sharon get back to him and say that Sharon and I would like to meet with Jason in my
Jason
office.
being one of the principals.
The rep from
Yeah.
the Sanctuary ATC.
For the rep, yeah.
He scheduled a couple of meetings, one he couldn't make, he had to cancel. And then he showed up the day of the meeting that Sharon and I were supposed to meet with him, and he had 4 or 5 other people with him. And I can honestly tell you that we weren't prepared to have that many people come to my office and meet on the subject, and we truly just felt that this was just for us to get on board on what the ATC actually was going to involve. And at that time, we didn't really even think about Plymouth being the only picked site in Northern Country.
This was not something that was on our radar, really.
No, you know, WMUR even put it on the news on June 9th. So even though this was signed in 2013, it didn't seem to hit the news again until the
Recently.
beginning, the middle of June. And then it didn't hit us at all. There was no red flag saying that Plymouth had been selected. So when he showed up with this many people, it immediately turned into a meeting that we weren't prepared for. And I mentioned to them in less than 10 minutes that this was a meeting that needed to take place at the level of a board, whether it be the Board of Selectmen or Sharon's Planning Board. And so they did leave. You know, they discussed a couple of things on using a software program that happened to pick Plymouth as the perfect epic center for the North Country. But it wasn't a meeting for us to debate what was right, what was wrong, and it truly should be handled at a board level, and they were told that, and they left. Since that, we had heard, well, after that, within a couple of days, within 48 hours, they came and dropped off a complete package that you mentioned to go before the planning board on the 20th for site plan review. And it was a complete package from beginning to end with all the prints, everything else that we would require to have the perfect package for a planning board. I happened to have a North Country Council meeting to go to as the town's rep that evening. When I went up to North Country Council, at the end of the meeting, there was a round table on things that could affect all of North Country, with health being one of them. I happened to bring up the question if the other towns up north had heard that Plymouth had been picked as the one and only site for North Country Council, for the North Country. And everybody there seemed to be shocked, with the exception of one individual that reached out to me after the meeting, who seemed to know a lot more than we knew, even about our own town and the one that was coming here. And I had caught that she was a rep from 2 towns that I didn't know where they were. I was able to find out the next day that she was the rep from Bethlehem and Littleton. With that said, we were getting more information from the outside than what had been brought to our attention. So Sharon and I scheduled a meeting to meet with our 2 reps and our senator, and Katie representatives, you were including, like you were there as a board member, and Deb Narrow. We met in my office, and again, a lot of the information was being shared for the first time that we had dug up between the 3 or 4 days that we were waiting to meet with each other in my office. The reps weren't completely filled in on what they had heard, and Senator Forrester did mention one thing to us that we didn't know and disagreed with. She had heard from 2 people from DHHS that after leaving here, the ATC Sanctuary rep went to DHHS and conditionally checked off a requirement that the town
Was well received.
was well, right, they were well received by the town. To which my comment to all of you that day in that meeting was, Sharon and I are not the town. And the meeting truly was less than 10 minutes. And it wasn't a back and forth, and this is right, and we disagree with that. And there wasn't them explaining everything to us and how this was going to work. So there's already a question there on how does that get automatically checked off. And since then, we tried to set up another meeting with this rep, and his response back was, thanks for reserving a possible meeting date, which was today, and never got back to us on it. But it also indicated that the DHHS has started a process to reach out to us and help us muddle through whatever this process is gonna be, which we don't know what it is. But that hasn't happened either. So none of us that I know of from the town of Plymouth or any board members on either board has been contacted by the DHHS. And the only thing I think we need to have a roundtable tonight about is get this kick-started, because I think the people in Plymouth have a right to know why this is coming to Plymouth, why we got picked, and are we the right pick? And it's questionable, you know, there's certain conditions they have to meet. Like I said, they have to get the blessing of the planning board. I mean, it has to pass anything, you know, just like O'Reilly's or the Inn or McDonald's or anything else that comes before the planning board. It has to go through those hoops in that process. But it should have also had hit the planning, select board at some level from our reps that it was coming this way. I know the members of North Country, the other towns, would like to know why Plymouth got picked. So I think our reps need to be contacted again. I think we need to have a couple of public hearings. One will be the board's, the other will be the one that the planning board has. And then while there's other conditions, one of them is it has to be 1,000 feet away from schools, and that includes universities. And while eating lunch at the end of last week, across from Genesis on Tenny Mountain Highway, I realized that since the location that has been picked, by the way, is Abode out on Tenny Mountain Highway, that Genesis, which is a behavioral center treatment facility, is also within 1,000 feet. And I thought it was by eye, I wasn't sure, and Mr. Murphy was able to verify that today, that actually the 1,000-foot line goes through the middle of the building and definitely the middle of the property. So they're within 1,000 feet. Whether they fall in the category of a school, I don't know. I do know that we have members that go there, and I'll have Brian explain that. But I think there's a lot of decisions that the community doesn't get to make on this because the DHHS is going to handle those decisions. But I think at the public hearing, I think people might want to show up and question and at least give their opinion. And I don't think we as a board can get into the opinion on marijuana itself being good, bad, ugly, indifferent, or anything. I think we need to be careful that our procedures are followed. Ordinances in town are being met. Zoning, planning board issues, all the processes that we normally go through, and that we don't skip any of those. And at the same time, I think this is going to be one of those subjects, as with abortion clinics that we had talked about earlier. Something like that, when it hits the community, I think the community has a right to have a few opportunities to express their feelings.
Sure.
And I think Brian can explain the part about Genesis. I know he went out there today.
Well, I know we were looking at that statute a little bit in our work session, and I think it kind of depends on the interpretation of the definition of drug-free zone, I guess, which says an area used for school purposes, I think, something like that.
Yes.
And then our connection, the school's connection with Genesis is, you want to explain that?
Well, I spoke to the director down there today, and tried to phrase it in terms that wouldn't put her on the spot, because HIPAA is so well entrenched in things of this. I mean, it's obvious they're a mental health center for everybody. They do, and this is where, I asked for raw numbers if she could provide them. They provide services to the SAU, which means our high school and primary school here in Plymouth. But they also have a contract with PSU to administer their mental health stuff. So I asked, where do you see them on campus? And she said, no, it's either at Spear Memorial or at the Tenny Mountain site. So because of the way that the education chapter on drug-free school zones was written, it kind of raised a flag to me, just on reading it as a layman, that a drug-free school zone means an area inclusive of any property used for school purposes for any school, whether or not owned by such a school, and within 1,000 feet of that property, and immediately adjacent to school buses. I did not determine if there's a set school bus stop on Smith Bridge Road, which there may very well be. But just, I mean, my take on that, and I'll bow to you, Counselor, is that it leaves it wide open. And if they say that it's part of the school because they do, then I think according to the statute, that's exactly what it is. But again, this all goes to the fact that there's such a darkness around this, and I don't mean that in kind of a social sense, but that it's been a blackout since 2013 until a month ago. If other state entities are supposed to weigh in and inform the Board of Selectmen and the public, they haven't done a very good job of that.
No, I read that statute, and I got the impression that Health and Human Services was supposed to, I think it says, work with the municipality and, make sure that they
Partner
didn't,
with the municipality.
put this in a place that did not welcome it. They said it's definitely up to the town's approval, and we're not gonna go anywhere where it's not wanted. So I'm a little surprised that they haven't, absolutely, and certainly no effort has been made to, it seems more like the effort has been made to keep it quiet until the minute before they file the site plan application.
The Municipal Association had put together a fact sheet on it, and I don't know the date of that show.
It was March of 2015, and that wasn't widely. I mean,
Right.
that was kind of...
Now, we get bombarded, as Paul had mentioned earlier, with things from the state and varying listservs and that, kind of what's new, what's happening. The Municipal Association puts out, I think it's a weekly newsletter online. I don't recall seeing any of that. I always scan the headlines for it. But one of the things that they were very clear about, that you can't zone against this.
Mm-hmm.
It has to fit within the zoning now. And even if we went and decide, I mean, we could certainly go down that road. But at this point in time, they would be grandfathered in from any change of zone, which would take place in March unless we pulled into, a sooner meeting, which, is there in the statutes, but again, they would still, having applied prior to any official act to change the zoning.
Yeah, I'm sure that
Grandfather.
the overall quietness of it was probably strategic. They didn't want to give anybody the chance to amend their zoning ordinance or start an
Essentially, that's the
amendment
feeling we
before
got.
the thing came in, so that's the way it works, I guess. Yes, Bill?
Well, I think Merrimack was one of the other targeted, sites, and they actually changed their zoning laws, or zoning rules very quickly.
Do you know how they did that?
I can't imagine how they could, actually, because it would have to go before.
It actually says you can't, so I don't know how they, that doesn't...
Well, the zoning laws that they did were consistent with the 1,000-foot, so they want to put that in their own zoning.
So maybe they were codifying something that was already a requirement.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, so it didn't change the playing field there.
Conditions.
They may have added a couple of conditions and something like that, but I cannot imagine that they were very consistent.
And certainly, we could do things that would limit, visibility of the thing or signage, and, very particular to that. But then you run the risk of spot zoning and also having appeals.
Do you think, I was wondering too, we talked about this a little bit, the district that they're supposed to be serving is this whole tri-county area, and this is about as far from the center of it as you can get, I would say. It's really close to the edge. I mean, you could go over to Freedom or someplace, maybe it'd be farther for more people, but I wonder if Health and Human Services has any kind of has any thoughts on where within the district these things are supposed to be located, or whether, I heard this thing about this, what was his name, Jason, said that they had some kind of computer program that zeroed in on Plymouth somehow, but I don't see that, I guess what you would do is you would plot everybody in the county and then figure out what's the shortest round trip mileage to one particular point. That would be like the population epicenter or something, I don't know.
Right,
Based on
but-
population density or something to
But the
that effect.
transportation network is not equivocable throughout the North Country.
Right.
I mean, 93 ends in Littleton, and there is a significant disadvantage to Coos County residents, just in terms of the transportation system.
Well, I guess our point is that Health and Human Services has made it pretty clear that they want to go to a place where they're welcome. So if we have a public hearing and maybe all of our people will come in and say they think it's a great idea, and maybe they won't. But I think we don't really know at this point how people will feel about it.
And I'll start reaching out to DHHS this week to see if, first of all, if they can send a rep on Monday to the next selectmen's meeting and start discussion then.
I think it's important that we have more information from them to make.
Because I don't know how much of a corner we're going to be painted into, because getting back to what Bill was mentioning and Brian, one of the questions and answers put out by New Hampshire Municipal Association is, may an alternative treatment center be banned as a prohibited use by a municipality, excuse me. And the answer is no. RSA Chapter 126 constitutes a comprehensive and detailed scheme showing that the state of New Hampshire intended to occupy the entire area of the licensing regulation. And then on the bottom it goes down to, in the geographic distribution of all four, the ATC centers as proposed by the New Hampshire ADM HEC would likely be preempted by RSA Chapter 126 should the municipality try to ban them from their town. So the DHHS is obviously
Sort of
behind
preempted.
it and preempting any banning of it. But that doesn't mean that the town, if it felt this is the wrong area, if North Country felt this is the wrong area, it also doesn't preempt any existing, I mean, if it's within their own rules, if it's within 1,000 feet of something, then it shouldn't be. And I believe that's why they didn't succeed in Littleton. They applied there, and the place that they were going to occupy was within 1,000 feet of a school zone. So,
And we could have a similar concern here.
right, like we haven't even had a chance, like Brian mentioned earlier, to check the bus stop. So, okay.
Anybody else?
I think it's really important that the citizens of Plymouth have the opportunity to be informed of all the aspects of what's happening here, and that they have a chance to voice their feelings on this issue.
So again, the way it will go is we'll try to get somebody here for Monday night, August 3rd, including maybe having our reps come back in, because they're out there trying to find out information too.
Right.
And so that'll be the second time that we would have talked about this and have public comments at the end. And then our public hearing would be August 17th. Planning board site plan review, August 20th. They then, I guess, is that when you would pick a public hearing night? When would you pick?
That is a public hearing.
That is a
It
public
does
hearing.
not have to all be decided that one night. It can be continued, but
But it actually is a public hearing.
They have a component as a public.
So that would be the biggest week and that's why we try to do the August 17th one.
Yeah.
That'll be the biggest week that the public will have two opportunities to come before the town.
How much notice of a public hearing do we have to give? Is it
Minimum 10 days plus 2. I mean, it's when it comes
12.
out.
It takes
not
us
the
12
date
to
of the
14
meeting. It's
days
12
to get it
yeah.
into the papers properly
Okay.
to achieve the 10-day notice.
Well, let's see if anybody else here has anything.
Is Franklin going to be one of the
I
centers?
understood it was Concord, which is still very close.
And somebody else said,
Merrimack.
so we don't know.
Yeah, Merrimack, that's the town that's changed its zoning. So,
Anybody else, Bill?
well, yeah, and just to be stated, the fact that medical marijuana is a bona fide treatment. And, if we had a site up in Berlin that was like the site for, the Tri-County, the Plymouth residents that might be prescribed medical marijuana would then have to be driving up to Berlin to, fill their prescriptions. So, it maybe is something that might have like it may not be a worse thing to have located in our community, but I guess that's to be discussed. But it would be kind of nice to have another clarification on that computer program as well, to find out why
How it was
we decided.
determined.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It just seems kind of illogical why Plymouth would be on the southern portion of the Tri-County, the central location for everybody in the North Country, but, I mean, that might be the case.
One would also think that the legislation and the rules would how they would locate in any given region.
One would
Is
think.
it geographically central or is it population driven? Like you
Well, it
said?
does say something.
There is a provision if accessibility is an issue, then the caregiver can have a certain amount of, it's all formulaic, but it's
But there's also
It's not
language in there
precise.
that the location is to be determined by the overall geographic convenience for the district, or something like that. But I think that's what they're saying they've done
Yeah.
with this, the computer program. John?
Was there not something stated in there that a couple of towns were excluded?
yes.
Hanover.
Well, only because they're in a different district.
Okay.
They're just
Right,
excluded.
they are
They're in District
included,
three.
just not
They're
part
in,
of the district.
whatever county that is, or
District
Cheshire.
3, yeah. Sullivan and Cheshire.
So, yeah. All right, can we ask Frank, did he have something to say? Public comment?
Yes, other states are wrestling with the same decision that's brought before you now, and the problem is the federal law is still not in favor of this. So how is the state of New Hampshire Attorney General's office indemnifying a town that would receive this? And what effect on the local law enforcement community would it be in just a general purpose having additional events occur within our town?
Yeah.
And, so how is the town protected legally by receiving, accepting, having a APC within its bounds through the legal system when federal law is still not up to date? And that's just a question because it's been on the news and other states are doing the same thing. Everybody's acknowledged the treatment as being a reasonable program. However, federal law puts us in the wrong spot. And then now that's going to affect our local law enforcement of having additional events occur.
Good point.
Yeah.
That might be a good point to make it a public hearing when there's some representation here.
I mean, we are going to hear whenever a number of any type of container gets opened, there will be a spillover of some type to the rest of the public. It's just a fact within law enforcement. We can't regulate everything. And there is a controversy over whether the feds and the states that are approving this are in compliance with each other.
Mm-hmm.
Or the feds don't feel that they are, but yet they're not really stepping up and
Right, they're not doing it.
I don't see any punishments being issued to any states that have accepted this and are practicing it right now.
Yeah.
Just a point of information, it's kind of interesting. This lot, Abode, has two entities, structures on it, and they propose to use both.
Oh, yeah?
It's twice, whatever.
Well, I think it says store in one and storage in the other. All right.
And so I'm sorry, we should mention one other thing to the public that I think is very important. And I think it's what really brings us here to the table. Never, and Brian alluded to this, have we been so blindsided. Even though we heard about it in 2013, I'm sorry, this has not hit the radar. Like everything else that's happening in the life of a municipality, not like this. There's the growing facility that we forgot to mention tonight that has to be located pretty nearby the point of dispensary. And we're not being told where that is. And somebody has to already know where that's going to be. So I don't know why all of this hasn't followed the regular channel of a lot of other controversial things. Though there's been plenty of unfunded mandates that towns have had to take on. But they've had plenty of time to talk about it. We heard last year that the bed and breakfast, and the taxes and the stuff that go towards that were gonna be taken away from the towns, and the managers were getting all kinds of red flags on that. We went to meetings and everything, and that got turned.
Is that like cutting back the room?
The meals and room tax, I mean, just like it did 6 years ago with the highway block grants. That got overturned by all of us hearing about it and getting together and going down to Concord and saying that money was raised for specific, this reason you can't change that, that use. But we got so much warning before that actually came to be. And then just to find out that we got picked by a town and never got contacted by the state, especially the DHHS ahead of time. They knew who the 3 companies that were going to be chosen to do this type of work. And they had to have some idea whether we were on one of the pick lists. So,
Yep. Okay. Anything else on that?
Just to encourage people to come to these meetings or hearings. It's
Yeah, and
important.
for anybody who wasn't listening, I guess just, we're gonna, August 17th, public hearing on the Alternative Treatment Center. August 20th is the
Site plan review.
site plan review,
Planning board.
planning board meeting.
which the public will be able to have input.
Yeah, absolutely.
We also have a meeting next week as well.
All right, so,
It's going to move fast one way or another.
motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second to adjourn. Thank you all.
Very non-public.
Oh, so,
Yeah, all those in favor?
would you, well, don't we have to, we really need a
Oh, yeah,
motion
yeah,
to go
yeah.
into non-public.
Okay, so
Withdraw the motion to adjourn
yeah, withdraw that motion.
and make a motion to go into non-public.
And I'll make a motion to go to non-public under 91A.
Discuss 91, under 91A32.
Personnel.
Personnel, A.
Personnel.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Thank you.
Thank you.
Public will make a motion to leave.
Okay.